Well, I'd reported on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Moscow and then to Kiev on ground, and the Prime Minister's effort even that time was to find common ground between the two for dialogue to move forward. Because India has constantly reiterated that this is not an era for war, era of war. You'd recall even in Ufa, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in that one-on-one to President Putin said that this is not the era for war. Incidentally, the trust, the camaraderie between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President, it's so visible and it's there for all to see. They had a very frank discussion and the Prime Minister actually thanked President Putin for that very frank discussion on the situation in Ukraine. I'm sure not many world leaders have access to that kind of information and frank conversations with the Russian president like Prime Minister Narendra Modi has, and he's had an equally frank conversation in the past and repeatedly and multiple occasions with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. When we spoke to President Zelensky, he too indicated that perhaps Prime Minister Narendra Modi can have a role to play in finding that forward movement. But the European capitals that you mentioned,
right?
Are they in a position to stop weaponizing this conflict even further? Stop giving longer range missiles to Ukraine? Because if missiles are being fired, road to peace clearly is not possible.
It is a tightrope walk where diplomacy is concerned. It's full of optics, it's full of messaging. And this is also messaging because, with that tightrope walk, because we are hosting as a country European nations where the 26th of January is concerned. We have a delegation where trade is concerned coming in from America. Even messaging like this, what the Prime Minister only reiterated, it's not something new that he said. He said that 3 times earlier. But the reiteration of that right before a crucial bilateral with Russia will also have consequences and good consequences, especially, where Western countries are concerned. So in that sense, India till now, doing a fine job. It's not an easy task in terms of, you keep both sides happy. But right now, India doing that, pat down. Also, euphemism is so much, Sandeep, who continues to be with us in the world of diplomacy. The sheer fact of gifting a Gita, to President Putin, also somewhere down the line, underlines the futility of war and then the messaging coming in now. So optics play go a long way, and messaging not just where Russia is concerned, but messaging to other Western partners across the globe.
Yes, absolutely. Preeti, the fact that first the Prime Minister gifted President Putin Gita translated in Russian, of course, there's a subtle messaging there. The Gita is one of the greatest philosophical works to have emerged out of India. The fact that it is actually on the battlefield, it is a discourse, several hundred verses that Sri Krishna gives Arjuna, the warrior, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. There is a lot of messaging there, and the fact that today Prime Minister Modi chose to mention the fact that India is on the side of peace is something that we have been saying all along for the last 4 years. India has not advocated war or finding solutions through war, and it's always been on the side of peace. And the fact that, he's said in the past as well that now is not the time for war. And now, at a time when there are certain sections which want this war to continue because they believe that Russia is down and therefore it can be, broken up or defeated on the battlefield, those kind of assumptions are in play right now. And those assumptions, faulty as they are the root cause of why this war has been continuing for so long. And the fact that the peace process, which was initiated almost a month ago, has not seen a resolution, primarily because there is a side which believes that Russia can be defeated on the battlefield. And the fact that Russia has lasted for 4 years in the face of what is a proxy war is evidence to suggest that, this war cannot be won on the battlefield. The fact is that there has to be a peace
Sandeep,
process.
not just lasted, but also dominated,
Yes.
and that's, practically what is playing out. But there are multiple layers to diplomacy. And as we were speaking, and as, Gaurav and you and I were discussing, the sheer fact of optics, of, gifting the Gita, euphemism there, the futility of war, then
Gita
giving
actually
out...
is, Preeti, the responsible fighting of war.
Also the futility of it. Ultimately, it ends with the, with the admittance of futility.
A war that has to be fought. Arjun wanted to run away from battlefield. Yogeshwar Sri Krishna tells Arjun that he must stay and fight.
But the ultimate message, Gaurav, also is in the Gita. I don't know how. Okay, what I take off, I think.
To fight.
I think Gita speaks differently to. I think Gita speaks differently to all, and I would reckon the ultimate message of the Gita to me is the futility of war.
Is to fight the just war and win.
Okay,
Evil
I
has
picked
to be
up, like I
defeated.
said, that's a great part about Hinduism. It speaks differently to everybody. What I actually took off from the Gita was the futility of war, and that's the message of Lord Sri Krishna eventually. But I want to bring back Sandeep and Gaurav, you can come in as well. But I want to also bring back Sandeep on the multi-layers of this diplomacy, Sandeep, and that's where it gets all the more interesting, because there is messaging there. There is, of course, the sheer fact that Russia today also stands isolated. Russia is pivoting to Asia. Russia is looking at China. China practically for scale and, where India is concerned, we take center stage because we will give, and and we have in the past as well, by standing by Russia, given it global acceptability. But we are also looking at Russia, and there is subtle messaging there as well of, in the current geopolitics of it all, to be geopolitically neutral, keeping in mind Russia's ongoing relationship with China, where you'd had President Putin just last month reiterate that the cooperation with China is endless.
Preeti, and the fact is that, see, Russia is a country it's a massive country. It straddles both Europe and Asia. It primarily sees itself as a European nation, and which is why it has been so actively involved in European affairs. And it has suffered grievously because of that. It has been at the receiving end of invasions first from France and then later from Germany. It's lost millions of its citizens in fighting a war of existence and survival in the Second World War. It came out on trumps and remade the 20th century as the first half of the 20th century was essentially the USSR. And now what we are seeing is the biggest pivot in the 21st century, because thanks to this war in Ukraine, Russia is doing is actually pivoting away from Europe. It knows that the hostility that the European countries have towards it will mean that Europe will remain blocked for Russia for the near foreseeable future. And that is the reason that it is pivoting towards East. It's pivoting towards Asia. It's pivoting towards China and, of course, India. Now, India and China have their own differences. Russia is also aware of this. And therefore, there is reason for us to believe that Russia can be the pivot around which India and China can work around. It could be the mediator. It could bring some, element of stability in this relationship. It's the Russia-India relationship has been spoken about. Russia, India, China, RIC. It has its inherent contradictions. The fact is that India and China have the world's longest border dispute. It's been, more than 4,000 kilometers. We've fought one war. We've seen the Galwan clashes in 2020. But there is a hope that, given the fact that Russia is involved in this relationship, it needs China in the short term. Russia is a resource superpower. China is a manufacturing superpower. India has the kind of people, it has talent, it is a huge market. All of these three countries bring a lot to the table. And there is a hope that, Russia, given its unique position in this relationship, can basically be the pivot around this RIC formation.
So far, India has been rather lukewarm to the Russia, India, China, RIC trilateral so far, especially escalating it to a summit level. Official level dialogue, yes. On the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a handshake, yes. But, the distrust between India and China. But Sandeep, as you very rightly mentioned, there's a pivot, and that would indicate it's not Russia, it's actually Europe that is increasingly getting isolated. If you look at the latest developments that are taking place, Sandeep, you have the American delegation in Moscow. You have President Trump, who invites President Putin to Alaska for a dialogue. You have Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and very senior leader Wang Yi in Russia. You have the Russian president in India. You have such major engagements that are happening, hoping to find a solution to war. And Europe is not on the table. Germany is not on the table. France is not on the table. England is not on the table. Italy anyway is distancing itself. All of this would seem to indicate Europe is getting isolated, not Russia, not India, not China, not the United States of America, because the solution is now being found, effort is being made minus Europe for now.
Yeah, absolutely, Gaurav. And the fact that European hostility is at the reason why we've not seen a peace process in the Russia-Ukraine war so far. The peace hasn't taken place because Europe is fundamentally opposed to making the kind of concessions that a peace plan with Moscow would involve. The fact is that Russia is not going to give up the territory that it has captured so far, the nearly 20% of Ukraine. In fact, it wants the remainder, another 5,000 square kilometers of the Donbas region, which is the Russian majority region of Ukraine. Once that is transferred, Russia believes that it can redraw the map of Ukraine,
Right.
and then there would be no fighting. The Europeans are principally opposed to that. So that is, again, a dichotomy in their approach, where they say that Russia threatens all of Europe with its military machine. At the same time, they say that Russia is weak. It is economically flawed. Its military is flailing. It's not been able to do the capture all of Ukraine or defeat Ukraine on the battlefield. This dichotomy is the one that is fueling this war, because like I said, Gaurav, the European countries, France, Germany, all the others believe that Russia can be defeated on the battlefield. Whereas we've seen through history, more than a century, 2 centuries, that all the countries
Yes.
that believe that Russia could be
But
defeated in the
Sandeep, there are,
battlefield.
where this isolation for Russia is concerned, there are also multiple economic layers to it, because Russia is, and today, that bilateral becomes all the more important, where India
Yes.
buying oil from Russia is concerned. But because of that, you have European countries that have laid sanctions on Russia. So Europe is not buying oil from Russia anymore, and Russia used to look at, Europe for that. So there is that economic isolation there that makes India's part all the more important. We were a huge buyer. Our, buys have fallen. This is, I would reckon, October is the lowest this time. So Russia would also be looking at us to compensate there. And, and it's a tightrope walk for India, because if you compensate there, then in a month you have a trade team coming in from America and a delegation where we are hoping that the tariffs are brought down from 50% to about 15%. So, in terms of, on the chessboard, Sandeep, multiple players there, and the moves diplomatically quite driven by strife, if you look at it, diplomacy-wise.